video is going to be about how I went from this, owning one single needle embroidery machine, to owning 4 industrial embroidery machines and working full-time from home. So if you'd like to know how I got to this stage, then keep watching, because I'm basically going to be talking about my life story over the past 7 years. The really nice thing about getting into machine embroidery as a business is there is so many different avenues you can go down. For me, I decided to turn my digital artwork into physical products to sell online and at craft shows, but there are so many other things you can do with machine embroidery. Essentially anything that you can personalize, you can turn it into a profitable business, because there is a demand for it. When I had this bright idea to start making patches, I literally thought my only hurdle would be learning how to use the embroidery machine. And that was just the first hurdle of many, as I quickly learned. Because starting a business isn't just about your product, it's about your time, it's about the marketing of that product, it's about how you engage with customers, how you build your website. And so there's a whole lot more involved than just creating a really nice product. When researching embroidery businesses, you'll probably see that a lot of businesses use larger machines like the ones I have behind me. These are multi-needle embroidery machines, and they do represent a very significant investment. And when you're starting out, you might not have the confidence or the cash to plow into very large machines like these because they are expensive. So where do you start? Well, you start small and you purchase what you can afford, which might very well be the cheapest embroidery machine on the market. And from there, you will work with what you have until you're ready to buy something bigger. When I was looking to buy my first embroidery machine, the only machine I could afford was actually the cheapest machine on the market at the time, and that was the Brother Innovis 90E. It had a top stitching speed of 450 stitches per minute. It had a maximum sewing field of 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters, and it only had one needle. So it was very much a hobbyist machine and pretty rubbish to use for running a business, but I didn't know that at the time. And for the sake of proving to my parents that I hadn't just spent £600 on a giant paperweight, I was going to make money off that machine even if it killed me. After that, I spent another £300 on digitizing software, which would allow me to turn my own artwork into embroidery files that I could then stitch out. At this point, after materials, I think I'd spent about £1,000 on my initial investment. And I set about turning my artwork into these elaborate patches, which looked like these. Of all of the decisions I made when making those initial purchases, I'd say only one decision was correct, and that was to purchase digitizing software. I really believe that buying the digitizing software was the correct thing to do, because it also taught me a lot about learning to embroider, and I had endless freedom to create as many designs as I want. It would have been cheaper to pay somebody to digitize for me, but I felt having that learning experience really helped me understand machine embroidery, and it also gave me the opportunity in the future to create custom designs for other people. So it was kind of about expanding my revenue streams. Even if I didn't know that at the time, I just wanted to have the creative freedom of digitizing software to turn whatever I wanted into patches without having to get somebody else involved. 3 things I would have perhaps done differently when purchasing my first embroidery machine is I should have asked myself what I actually wanted to make and how big these designs were going to be. The 10 by 10 sewing field is actually quite small, and it really limits you on what you can create. So I think I might have looked into purchasing a machine with a larger sewing field. That would be the biggest thing I would change. But usually when you buy an embroidery machine with a larger sewing field, that means the machine is more expensive. And so I would have perhaps looked into purchasing a machine secondhand off eBay or Gumtree or something like that, so I would get more machine for my money. And lastly, the third thing I would change is, rather than create very elaborate designs, although they looked really cool, because that embroidery machine only has one needle, that means that the machine stops and you have to physically change the color in between every color change, and that takes up a lot of time. I wish I'd thought a little bit more about the designs I was creating and focused on creating maybe 1 or 2 color designs rather than making embroidery patches that had maybe 6 or 7 color changes in them. But like I said, it was my first embroidery machine and I didn't really know what I was doing, so off I went. I created my patches and then I took probably the worst product photos you've ever seen in your life on my parents' laminate flooring. Honestly, everything I did at the start of my embroidery journey was completely chaotic, and how anyone actually bought anything off me is a mystery. But people were starting to buy things and that was great. But then I quickly realized that I wasn't actually making that much profit off my products. And that was because although I'd taken into account the cost of materials and electric, I hadn't really taken into account the amount of time it took me to make these products. Making these patches that had 7 or 8 color changes could sometimes take me around about an hour to make, and then I'd only be selling that patch for about £7 or £8. It's not good. And I wouldn't survive, and that was bad business. Typically, I like to price my products by the rule of thirds. Whatever it costs me to make the product, I times it by 3. If something costs me £3 to make, then I charge £9 for it, because that additional £6 usually accounts for my time it takes to make the product. And it seemed the only way for me to be able to meet this goal would be to increase my production speed. And so I bought my second machine. I wasn't ready to take the leap and purchase a multi-needle embroidery machine, but in hindsight, considering my products were selling rather well, rather than purchase another single needle embroidery machine, I should have just saved more and then gone for the multi-needle. But I think I didn't kind of expect my business to reach the point where I would need a multi-needle embroidery machine, and the price difference between a single needle and a multi-needle is thousands of pounds. So I opted to buy the Brother V3, with the benefit of the V3 being it had the much larger sewing field that I regretted not having before, and also it's stitched at an impressive 1000 stitches per minute, which is very good for a single needle embroidery machine. But even with that super speedy sewing speed, didn't change the fact that it still had one needle, and I essentially had to stand over my embroidery machines and babysit them while they stitched out, so I could change the colours as quickly as possible when the machine stopped. And then after I bought my V3, it wasn't that long again after that I started feeling the strain of not being able to meet the demand for the product quick enough. And I also want to say that this wasn't like sort of an overwhelming demand, like and I can quit my job and live off this demand. It was just a nice steady flow of sales. However, the single needle machines just meant that I couldn't produce fast enough, and I realized that if I wanted to carry on with this business, I was going to have to secure a multi-needle machine which could change the colors automatically. If only my two brain cells had just scrubbed together a little harder and realised that single colour designs and projects were the key to financial efficiency, that would have been great. But instead, my mind rolled in another direction and I started looking at selling my products at craft fairs and Comic Cons. The draw of these events appealed to me because they were very intense selling events over one weekend, and you'd see a massive return in just a small period of time. After attending a few of these events, I accumulated enough to put down a deposit on my first multi-needle machine, and we brought her home on July 21st, 2017, and we still have her, and she is called Matilda. I also opted to purchase a cap frame with the multi-needle embroidery machine, which opened up another avenue for sales, as now I could embroider on ball caps as well. However, what you will notice is after purchasing a Brother multi-needle embroidery machine, every machine I have bought since has been made by a true industrial manufacturer, and that is when Happy Japan entered the picture. If you'd like to see why I didn't continue using Brother for my business, I have made a video about that. I will put the link down in the description below. But essentially, I just found Happy Japan to be a much better value for money embroidery machine. It's much quicker, much more durable, and it has a more versatile sewing field. The transition from single needle flat bed embroidery machines to the multi-needle was when the business stopped being a side hustle and generally started taking over everything. At this point, I'd invested a lot of money, but the important thing was I was finally starting to see a return on my investment, because up until then, everything that I had earned had gone back into the business. The big benefit of the industrial machines, particularly the Happy Japan, was their speed. Patches that used to take me an hour to make on the flatbed machines were taking me about 20 minutes on Happy Japan. So if we take that example I gave from earlier, that £6 profit I mentioned suddenly became £18 an hour on one machine, and then you could times that by 3 because I had the 3 multi-needle embroidery machines. So you could see like just how much more I was able to produce in 1 hour with the multi-needle machines compared to when I owned a flatbed embroidery machine. Obviously, profit margins aren't as clear cut as that. I mean, some days you might not get any sales, or you might take a 2-week holiday, but you can see the potential in it. I then took a break from purchasing any more equipment and focused on streamlining the business itself. I improved my digitizing to make sure that the embroideries were stitching out as quickly as possible, and I also started ringing up the companies that I purchased my materials from to try and negotiate the prices down. A lot of companies were open to this if I placed bulk orders, and by reducing my outlay I was able to increase my profits. And as I wasn't pumping so much money into the business on new equipment, I could see how much money I was earning from the business, and at this point I was busy enough to be able to step back from my full-time job. And I think it was early in 2019 that I decided to work from home full-time and focus on growing the business. In the following year, I watched my business steadily increase, and I'm very grateful for platforms like Etsy and eBay that drive traffic towards my products for me, because if there's one thing that I've been consistently bad at since I started, that is social media and promotion. Being totally honest, I'm also surprised that this YouTube channel does as well as it does, because I am so bad at marketing myself, which is why I want to say thank you for supporting this channel, and if you could give this video a like, that would be really great. Someone said to me once that running a business is 20% product and 80% marketing. And I saw the impact that viral marketing can have on your business at the end of 2020, when someone out there with no prompting at all posted a video of one of my products and just said she loved it. And that, coupled with the pandemic where everyone was stuck at home with little to do except shop online, that one video on TikTok caused my shop to explode. I was totally unprepared for it. It was the most wonderful, overwhelming and stressful experience of my life, but it happened, and it just goes to show the impact of how a good understanding of social media trends can work for reaching the right catchment audience. And not long after that, I started making these YouTube videos, and our largest machine, the HCU, arrived. I do feel now that my house is maxed out on embroidery machines. If I was to ever consider getting another one, I would have to move into a unit or start outsourcing the work, which I don't really want to do because I enjoy working from home and doing it myself. To keep my business where I want it to be, regularly refreshing and adding products to my online store has helped keep the flow of new sales consistent. The same as regularly updating my shop appearance to kind of keep it fresh. I'd say I have to do a complete overhaul of the website appearance once every 2 years or so to keep it current. I don't think there's ever going to be a point in my business where I can stop creating new products or keep one theme forever. It's all about being able to adapt to the market and supply a product or a service that's in demand. Going back to the start of the video where I said I like embroidery because it's so versatile, that is very beneficial when sales might start to get a little slow. You can branch out into different avenues. You could even be the person who supplies someone else's side hustle. And all of that brings us to present day, and I'm very happy that I have a small business that enables Sooty to live in a life of luxury, fully stocked with all the gravy bones and wet food a dog could wish for. To anyone thinking of starting an embroidery business, be prepared for it to steal your soul and to work more hours for yourself than you've ever had to work for anyone else when you're working in full-time employment. There will be times when you hate it, but you're also going to enjoy it, so good luck. If you found this video helpful, I would really appreciate a thumbs up, and if you could also subscribe to my channel, that would go a long way in supporting the growth of my channel. But other than that, thank you for watching, and hopefully I will see you next time. Bye bye.